Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Kinzinger, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've got a lot of really important issues we talk about every day out here. I want to talk about something that's happening a few thousand miles away, but affects us all. I want to talk about what's going on in Syria. Mr. Speaker, I remember back, I think in 2011, being in Israel and standing in the Golan Heights and looking over towards Syria, and our guide at the time made the comment that there's a little disturbance over there, and there was some concern about where that was going to lead, and we all know what's happened since. There's a lot of attention focused on Yemen right now, but in Syria there's 500,000 Syrian civilians that have been killed by a brutal dictator, Bashar al-Assad, 50,000 of which are children. Some of those children, in spectacular displays, were murdered by the use of chemical weapons, and I give great credit to our president and this administration for responding as America that believes in morals and strength should, by bombing and destroying some of the facilities that did that and holding to our red line. But the war hasn't stopped, and the egregious nature of the war continues, and I actually believe that the nature of that war is creating another generation of terrorists, people that feel that they don't have hope, people that feel that they don't have opportunity, and when hope and opportunity don't exist, people turn to extremes. And this is one case. I want to talk specifically, though, about a really sad situation. A lady from Chicago, an American citizen, Layla Shweikani, who was murdered by the Assad regime. She was Chicago-born, and after a few years ago, basically made the decision that she had a passion for the people of Syria and decided to go and be an aid worker in eastern Ghouta. 2 years ago, she disappeared. We know that she was put into Assad's prison camps and tortured for 10 months, an American, by the way, before being transferred to a military court. Unfortunately, a few weeks ago, our worst fears were confirmed. Ms. Layla was actually tortured to death and executed on December 28th, 2016. The first American we know that was tortured and killed by Bashar al-Assad. We know there's other Americans in captivity, and we know this is something that needs to be addressed. Mr. Speaker, there's some in our government, on this chamber and in the other chamber, that express sympathy to Bashar al-Assad and believe the antiquated theory that oppression of civilians is the only way to prevent terrorism. And I would argue that in an age of information, in an age of knowledge, oppression only leads to more terrorists. Oppression leads to hopelessness, to a lack of opportunity, and to turning to the only option they know at that time, which may be ISIS or al-Qaeda, because they don't see any other opportunity or hope. And Mr. Speaker, these people that express sympathy in our government, while I believe that's something they have to answer with their Creator ultimately someday, I'm curious now what the response of everybody is when we find out that an American woman was tortured and killed in the prison camps of Assad. We have a bill called the Caesar Civilian Protection Act. Caesar was a brave hero from Syria that took tens of thousands of pictures of torture victims of Assad, brought them, smuggled them to the United States, and in front of my committee in Foreign Affairs showed some of these pictures. And there was an act that would sanction many members of the regime that was passed unanimously out of Foreign Affairs, passed out of the House, largely supported in the Senate, as being held up by a junior senator from Kentucky. I call on the other side of this blessed Capitol to pass the Syrian Caesar Protection Act. I call on the administration, as they have said. They said they support this, to sign this, put this on the resolute desk. We talk a lot about the importance of women and equality, and I couldn't agree more. But in that debate, I think it's important to remember that in Syria, an American civilian woman was tortured to death. We look in places like Afghanistan and know the oppression of women that occurred there. And we know that America stands for something greater, and it's not just through the use of military, but through what we believe and what we stand for and the light that we shine. Mr. Speaker, this is a terrible situation, Ms. Layla's death, but let us learn from it and let us go forward and let the people of Syria be free. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.